What are the most suspicious coincidences in history? When they shot The Wizard of Oz, the actor who played the wizard, Frank Morgan, wanted to have a coat that looked elegant but had gone to seed. The wardrobe department visited a second-hand store and purchased an entire rack of coats for him to choose from. One day while wearing the coat he chose on set, he turned one of the pockets to discover a label indicating that the coat had been made for L. Frank Baum, or in other words, the author of The Wizard of Oz. They contacted his wife who was still alive and it was verified that the coat once belonged to him. After filming was finished, the coat was returned to Ms. Baum. The British actor Anthony Hopkins, who shot a famous Hannibal Lecter, was delighted to hear that he had landed a leading role in a film based on the book The Girl from Petrovka by George Feifer. A few days after signing the contract, Hopkins traveled to London to buy a copy of the book. He tried several bookshops, but there wasn't one to be had. Waiting at Leicester Square Underground for his train home, he noticed a book apparently discarded on a bench. Incredibly, it was The Girl from Petrovka. That in itself would have been coincidence enough, but in fact it was merely the beginning of an extraordinary chain of events. 2 years later, in the middle of filming in Vienna, Hopkins was visited by George Feifer, the author. Feifer mentioned that he did not have a copy of his own book. He had lent the last one, containing his own annotations, to a friend who had lost it somewhere in London. With mounting astonishment, Hopkins handed Feifer the book he had found. "Is this the one?" he asked. With the note scribbled in the margins, it was the same book. What makes this suspicious is that it's actually far more likely that Anthony Hopkins is a book thief. There was a guy on death row who was supposed to be killed by electrocution. His lawyer got him out of death row, but he was later found on his cell's toilet electrocuted by the headphones he had plugged into his TV and was trying to fix with his teeth. Decades later, another person was supposed to get the electric chair, again was stayed from the electrocution, and again was found on his cell's toilet, electrocuted by headphones plugged into his TV. It seems too suspicious to me. The first British soldier killed in World War I and the last to be killed in that conflict are interred within 6 feet of each other. No one noticed at the time, and it wasn't until the arduous task of trying to compile the lists and whereabouts of the horrific number of dead by the British government years after the war that the position of their graves was noticed. I call bulls. You don't get a time of death in war. Less than a year before John Wilkes Booth killed Abraham Lincoln, Booth's brother Edwin saved the life of Lincoln's eldest son, Robert. May not be a coincidence, as the Booths were Confederate spies. In the 1200s, Japanese settlements were being invaded by the Mongols. The Mongols had the largest naval fleet ever amassed at the time, and Japan was facing an extremely dire situation. However, the Mongol fleet was swept up almost entirely in a great typhoon that eviscerated their forces, saving the Japanese. 7 years later, the Mongols returned and were destroyed by yet another typhoon. These typhoons were named Divine Wind, or kamikaze. The soldiers in World War II were to be the same divine wind that would sweep the enemy from the seas like before. Roman Emperor Julian wanted to build the sacred Third Temple of the Jews. He wanted to do so for some not so good reasons. However, each time the temple was worked on, flames would come out from the earth and burn the workers, and an earthquake happened. The project was abandoned. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams would both die within hours apart on the 4th of July. Not just any 4th of July, but in 1826 while the country celebrated its 50th anniversary. Epstein committing suicide on the eve of a trial that would have exposed a lot of powerful people as pedophiles and rapists. With malfunctioning security cameras outside his cell, anyone who doesn't think he was taken out is naive. An ex-girlfriend and former chum both booked spontaneous weekends away, in the same city, in the same hotel, on the same weekend without planning it to happen. They defo did not hook up whilst we were still a couple. I mean, at that point they really should have. 2 women, Mary Ashford and Barbara Forrest, were killed on the 27th of May, 157 years apart. Both spent their final hours dancing. In 1817, Ashford was with a man named Abraham Thornton after going to a dance with her friend. Hours after she was last seen, her bruised body was found in a water-filled pit in Pipe Hayes Park by a worker. Authorities believed Ashford was sexually assaulted and drowned, and Thornton was tried for her murder. Though he did to admit having sex with Ashford before parting ways with her, Thornton insisted he didn't kill her and was found not guilty after 3 witnesses backed up his alibi. 157 years later, authorities say Barbara Forrest was raped and strangled on the 27th of May, 1974, also in Pipe Hayes Park. Forrest had been out dancing with her boyfriend until 1 a.m. when he said he walked Forrest to a bus stop. Police charged Forrest's co-worker with her murder after bloodstains were found on his pants and an alibi proved false. His name, Michael Ian Thornton. He was similarly acquitted due to a lack of evidence. Police records note that both women spoke of feeling a sense of dread in the days before their deaths. Both murders remain unsolved. In the 1970s, a cab driver in Bermuda picked up a passenger and began his journey. At a stretch of road known as Hog Bay Level, the taxi had a collision with a motorcycle scooter, killing the rider of the cycle. Almost 1 year later, the same cab driver picked up the same passenger, again beginning their journey. At the same stretch of road, the taxi again collided with a motorcycle, killing the rider of the cycle. The rider of the second cycle was the brother of the deceased rider of the first cycle. The LDS, Mormon, Church received a revelation from God to do away with polygamy right around the time they were wanting statehood for Utah and getting pressure from the government. Coincidentally, they received another revelation in the 70s that allowed black people to hold leadership positions in the church just when social pressures were increasing. Currently they are taking a very unusual soft approach towards illegal immigration, very unlike their typical conservative stance, which seems strange until you look at the numbers and realize their growth is mostly happening in third world countries. I predict another revelation coming soon regarding gay marriages in their temples, since droves of young Mormons are leaving the church over this issue. Oh man, we just had another revelation. We have to install the slowest moving walkways of any airport in the world and make them wide enough for a family of 7 to stand shoulder to shoulder, preventing anyone from passing while they point out and comment on every stupid art piece they pass while you stand behind them and fume. The guy who shot Archduke Ferdinand was literally eating at a sandwich shop after the failed assassination of Archduke Ferdinand when the Archduke drove down the street he was on while he was leaving the shop. He was on his way to visit people who had been injured in the failed attempt, but his driver made a wrong turn. Then again, World War I was also to a degree predestined by the complex web of treaties and alliances set up by Bismarck. During the War of 1812, the British were about to take complete control of the US. A hurricane hit Washington, D.C. and scattered the British troops and they retreated to Baltimore. Had the storm not hit when it did, we all might be speaking English today. Thank God we aren't. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams died within 5 hours of each other on the 4th of July 1826, the 50-year anniversary of their signing the Declaration of Independence. Adams' last words were, "Jefferson lives too so dang." The size of the sun and moon in relation to each other, and their distance from the earth, and positions in the sky are in the exact proportions to make solar eclipses possible. Ditto rotation and orbit speeds of the moon are such that we always see the same face. The second one is an actual phenomenon called being tightly locked. The uneven weight distribution of the moon caused one side to be stuck facing the earth. My mother passed away on the 1st of October. Her birthday was the 16th of September. My father's mother passed away on the 16th of September. Her birthday was the 1st of October. My little sister's birthday is the 20th of January. My last girlfriend's birthday is also the 20th of January. Her sister's birthday is the 20th of December. I've also dated 3 different girls with birthdays on the 20th of December. A fire started in the monastery on Lindisfarne. Some Norsemen happened to be passing by. They saved all of the holy relics, but the monks perished in the fire. Whoa, I thought, you learn something new every day. Amazing. Cheers, our Scandinavian brothers. I don't remember all the details, but holy crap, the amount of times Hitler almost died. I only remember 2 off the top of my head, but Hitler almost drowned when he was young and was saved, and he was shot in World War I but was also saved by an American soldier. There are a few others but I forget. It's all time travelers trying and failing to kill Hitler. It was long rumored that Macho Man Randy Savage was ousted from the WWF after a sexual relationship with Vince McMahon's young daughter, Stephanie. The name Stephanie McMahon is an anagram for the Macho Man penis. It's not history but this happened to me this summer. I grew up in Omaha, pretty random, average city. I played for this youth hockey team. They're called the Omaha Junior Lancers from the ages of 5-15 before moving to a different state. I'm now in my 30s. I was in Paris, across the globe this summer, just skateboarding down a street and I wandered into a vintage store. After chatting with the sweet lady who owned the place, I found a size small youth practice hockey jersey from my old team in neon the rack of shirts. It was being sold for €80 as a fashion shirt. They barely even have hockey over there. She couldn't believe it and just gave me the jersey. Upon talking to her further, she has a cousin that owns a restaurant in Minneapolis, my current city, same neighborhood and all. That was 1 in a garbillion small world things that happened in one stop. A friend of mine from the US was lost in a small German town. He walked into a store for directions and the clerk was his first grade girlfriend who recognized him. 9/11. There was a training exercise in Canada that had a lot of our pilot and planes there for joint exercises. So even if we knew there was hijackings, no planes were near to do anything. I can tell you that after the second tower fell, I hightailed it out of the city, grabbed my car in Jersey City and was driving through Hoboken before the first fighter jet arrived. That was more than an hour after the first plane hit. Monica Lewinsky looking for her lost necklace underneath the presidential desk on the same day Bill Clinton sent his pants out for dry cleaning. That moment changed history forever, or not. I hate when I fall and I accidentally trip over my loose pants around the ankles which make me pants drop around the hips on my neighbor where she now files a restraining order on. Also, apparently cleaning my binoculars in the same direction of her window and looking through it to see if the lens are clean is also frowned upon. Kennedy just so happened to be driving by when a bullet hit him. Can you imagine trying out your new gun and the effing president get in front of the sights? Like what a bruh moment. The husband of one of the only civilians to be killed on US mainland soil during World War II, one woman and several children killed in a single incident, was the first American to be killed in the Vietnam War. He was a missionary in Vietnam. That's what he did with himself after seeing his pregnant wife blown up by a Japanese firebomb balloon. It's not actually suspicious I guess, but it is interesting. Everyone is familiar with the well-known poet and horror master Edgar Allan Poe. However, most people aren't familiar with the eerie coincidence that happened. In 1838 Edgar Allan Poe's novel was published, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym. The story centers around a crew on a ship by the name of Grampus who find themselves stranded on the ship with no food or water. The crew then has to decide which one of them will be sacrificed to provide meat for everyone else. They decide on a former mutineer named Richard Parker who is then stabbed to death, his hands, head and feet thrown overboard. The two remaining crew members are close to death at the time of rescue. Here's where it gets freaking weird. The year is 1884 and a yacht named the Mignonette leaves England bound for Sydney, Australia. The yacht ended up sinking and the 4-man crew barely made it out in the lifeboats alive. One of the men on the ship is a 17-year-old man by the name of, get this, Richard Parker, who was eaten by the other crew members so they could survive after stabbing him to death just like in the story. If that isn't one of the most odd coincidences ever, I don't know what is. When a communist decided to burn down the Reichstag. What a coincidence. Nazis were just looking for a reason to say communists are dangerous. The curse of Topekanu. Every 20 years besides the last 40, since William Henry Harrison, the president has died in office. Besides the last 40. Shocker that the pattern doesn't work. 25 years ago I was working as a reporter when I received a tip from a police detective in Belgium. He'd been working to break up a child pornography ring, but suddenly the case was closed by his bosses. The order had come from the mayor. He was so upset that the case had been squashed that he mailed us some of the evidence. We received 2 black and white stills from a surveillance camera. They featured a man. We knew that his name was Robert. He lived in the south of Holland, and he operated by feeding hungry kids in order to abuse and film them. We searched all over for Robert. We showed the photos to all our sources connected with these networks, and after months of searching, we finally discovered him living just a few kilometers from my house. We rang his doorbell, told him some bull story, and got inside. There were piles of VHS tapes everywhere. We waited until he went to the bathroom and grabbed as many as we could. They contained all the horrible things you could imagine. We called Robert into our offices, showed him the tapes, and he started pointing fingers at other people. A giant ring was uncovered, and one of the people that Robert accused was named Mr. Norbert. We discovered him in one of the videos. He was only visible in 4 or 5 frames. And do you know who he was? The brother of the Belgian mayor who squashed the original investigation. Here's a personal story. For 7 months in 2018, my family hosted a foster son. He had come to us from a small town 2 hours away from my city metro area, around 600k population. He was placed into foster care after his father died and his mother turned out to be neglectful, so he had no legitimate adult guidance to save him from his own bad decisions. During his time with us, he maintained regular contact with his uncle, his dad's half-brother who lived across town from us. We supported their contact and occasional weekends together since the uncle was pretty responsible and a good role model that the kids needed. We had maintained that arrangement with the uncle for several months when we learned uncle was the owner and landlord for the house next door to us, which he rented out. Ooh, I got a good one. There was this well-known rich guy who liked to diddle children and allegedly, a wink wink, has a sex ring of them for the mega rich where they take turns with being complete disgusting pieces of crap. Well, when they got this ringleader, he tried to commit suicide, so of course the authorities want him to talk. Right. So they put him on suicide watch, as is routine. Weirdly enough though, 2 weeks later nobody knows really why he was taken off suicide watch, left alone in a cell, without anybody watching this suicidal guy with the knowledge to ruin a lot of people's with a lot of money's life. Well, anyway, he committed suicide. So now who knows, and to the media who cares? Anyone remember his name? I think it's Epstein. I would have to say the fact that a real-life terrorist event where 4 planes were hijacked and flown into buildings occurred on the very same day that all air traffic controllers in the US were running a simulation of that exact event, and were therefore very slow to catch on that it was really happening versus being simulated. That's got to be one of the most unlikely occurrences to happen coincidentally. The United States was running multiple drills for hijacked planes, among other things, on the day of 9/11, confusing all involved and delaying response times considerably. Lincoln created the Secret Service the same day he got assassinated. It had a different purpose back then, but the idea is funny. That the military had a team that found some evidence of people working for Bin Laden, but his group was here on valid passports, so they couldn't turn in the evidence to the FBI. In 1898, Morgan Roberson published a fiction book called Futility. The book told the story of a great ocean liner, the largest and most modern in the world, with great innovations in safety making it thought unsinkable, owing to its many watertight bulkheads, but which then hits an iceberg in the North Atlantic a few hundred miles off the coast of Newfoundland on an April night, and sinks. The loss of life is greatly increased by there being not enough lifeboats for everyone on board. The ship in the novel was called the Titan, published 14 years before the sinking of Titanic in very similar circumstances. Roman Emperor Commodus held large lavish gladiatorial events, so large and bold that Rome ran out of grain. This led to the Senate to agree on halting expansion into Germania to feed the city. This led to the Senate stopping expansion altogether, beginning the downfall of the empire 3 centuries later. I forgot the name, but that one boat that spontaneously exploded by Cuba, which kinda helped America start to fight against Cuba, having it look like Cuba was picking a fight. Attila the Hun leaving and not invading Italy after meeting with the Pope. Himmler committing suicide while under British custody. Princess Diana tells her son on the phone she's worried about something. A divorcee in the royal family and was rumored to have been carrying a baby of mixed race. Then she ends up in that car crash. Coincidence? Or some members of the royal family conspiring against her? If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.